Hi everybody. So happy to be with you all today. Yeah, we're actually trying something a little bit different. I think usually, the speakers that come in and do the webinars with savvy ladies, they usually just go through um, just a full-on presentation, and I kind of had a conversation with Lisa and then Maggie, and wanted for this to be more of an interactive experience. So I will be sharing some of my slides, but I would also like it if Maggie had mentioned, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to just share it in the chat box, and we will get to those. We're going to do a little bit of a Q&A at the end of this. So yeah, let's start. So this is self-care tools and practices during a time of crisis. Let's see. Okay, so the first thing that I kind of wanted to start talking about is, when I talk about self-care with a lot of people in general, and also just, clients that come to me, the first thing that they kind of want to talk about is they would love to be able to do self-care, and they would love to, do all the things essentially, but they feel like, number one, they don't have enough time. Number two, they don't really necessarily know what type of self-care that they should or should not be doing. And there's this idea that, they need to do it perfectly, right? So these are some of the things that kind of get in the way when people think about self-care and what they want to do for them. I think like most of us kind of have read or spoken to friends, etc., and we often talk about like taking a bath or buying ourselves flowers, things like that, but maybe we don't have a very specific list of what may work for us and when it may work for us. So let's take a look at that. The one thing that I like to talk about is in terms of when we can find time to do self-care, especially at a time like this. Obviously we're going through like a huge change just on a global level, and there's so much uncertainty, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week, how long we're going to be kind of like cooped up at home. And obviously we have different schedules than what we're used to when we commute to work, spend time at work, and then, we get back home. So we are faced with a little bit of a different approach in terms of self-care. So a good thing to start with is to see what the new schedule looks like, right? And something that I think is really important, and it may seem like a small task, but it makes a big difference in the scheme of things, and how I like to plan these things. So just pulling up your calendar and looking at how you're scheduling your time and allocating specific time slots that may work for you for the type of self-care that you want to do. And another way of doing this is to think about, specific things that you may or may not want to do for yourself, and you can schedule them in, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and a monthly basis. So some of these things you might want to do every day. For example, if you have a meditation practice, that might be something that you do every day. Other things, let's say work out, maybe you don't work out every day, but you want to work out, let's say 3 times a week, then you would look at how you can slot those times in. And then other things, maybe you want to get a massage or go to the spa, etc. That could be a monthly task, and that could be allocated on your calendar as a monthly task. And that could be just one way of getting away from this idea that, we don't have time, and choosing to look at how we allocate our time a little bit differently. Because at the end of the day, time really is a bit of a made up idea, especially when we think about, just 1 minute. If we're in a plank, for example, for a minute, it feels like it's lasting forever. But if we're just hanging out with a friend, 1 minute feels like a very short period of time, right? So it's really more about mindset and how we want to, the perspective that we want to have around this, right? And so the other thing that, we want to look at, why do we even want to, self-care? What does it all mean, and why do we do it, right? And a lot of times I think, especially in today's society, it's so easy to just be on the go and on the go and on the go. We're always doing one thing, and then we're thinking about the next thing that we need to do. So using some of these practices, and we're going to get to that in a bit, helps us to slow down, right? It helps us to slow down, as I like to say, smell the roses, right? It helps us to create more space in our lives. And when we take that pause, we're able to really notice what actually matters the most to us, right? Because if we're constantly running around and doing all the things, first of all, we're not really finding the time to fully enjoy ourselves, right? But we may also be doing things that, if we really thought about it, we don't necessarily want to do, right? And what I'm kind of talking about here is, a lot of times we tend to say yes to a lot of things, right? An important aspect of self-care is actually being able to say no. And so this also helps with stress management. Obviously, it helps us to take deeper breaths, to slow down, to get centered, to get grounded, right? And another thing that happens when we're able to put in different practice of self-care, whether it is, meditation or breath work or journaling, or maybe going out, and taking a walk in nature, it really helps us to get away from the sympathetic nervous system, which is this, the flight, freeze, and just go, go, go constantly type of mode, right? It really helps us to allow ourselves to get into the parasympathetic system. There really is the rest and digest system, and that's really where we would want to be, because this is where we're able to think clearly, we're able to stay connected with ourselves, with the people that we're spending time with, right? And we're really able to slow down and to enjoy ourselves. The other thing, obviously, with self-care is that when we care for ourselves, we are able to create this place of empowerment for ourselves, right? So then when we go out in the world, we come from a place of empowerment, and we can do more, and we feel more confident about the tasks at hand. And so, and this makes me think about, priorities and boundaries. And I think a lot of times, especially for us as women, we tend to think that, it's selfish, right? It's selfish to put ourselves first, because we feel that we need to take care of everybody else, right? And I think, as women, it comes more naturally to us to be the nurturer, right? We have that within us, and we want to care and we want to nurture for the people around us, maybe our partner, maybe our kids, or, other family members, friends, etc. But the truth is that it's actually the other way around, right? It's actually selfless to put ourselves first, because if we are able to fill our own cup first, so to say, then, the way we show up with our family, the way we show up as a mother or as a daughter, as a sister, as a, colleague, will be from a more fulfilled place, right? Because if we are um, interacting with other people and we feel, sluggish, maybe you haven't gotten enough sleep, maybe, we didn't get enough to eat, we were running too late, we didn't get breakfast in, et cetera, then, we're not going to be our best selves, right? So it's kind of like, I'm sure some of you have heard that quote about when you're flying on an airplane, they always tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, right? And this is essentially what you're doing here. You have to take care of you. And once you have done that, then, you are a better nurturer. You are a better provider to others, right? Okay. um and so this also kind of like goes into, and this is a bit of a deeper um a deeper conversation and a deeper subject. And when I work on with clients one-on-one, we tend to dive a little bit deeper into this, but essentially it comes down to a conversation about worthiness and self-confidence and what we feel that we're worthy of, and how much time we think we are worthy of, and how much we're willing to give to ourselves versus to other people, right? And I think like this also comes back to this idea of, being women in this world, and just like through society, how, there's certain ideas that we have been conditioned to believe, right? And so it's really important to think about, what is my commitment to myself? How does my commitment look like in terms of self-care? How much time am I willing to put aside to nurture myself, right? If if I'm a mom and I have kids, am I willing to ask my partner to, take care of the kids while I do something for myself, right? Am I willing to maybe say no to, going out to dinner with friends because I need some alone time, right? So the way to approach this really is, I think a good question is to ask ourselves, what am I willing to let go of as to creating something that I haven't had in the past, right? Because if we think about it in a way, and I think it was Albert Einstein that said this first, but like doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity, right? Um, so if we're constantly running around, if we're constantly, in a sense, giving our power away, we're not actually asking for what we want and for what we need. So then we can create some of these self-care routines and principles and rituals for ourselves. Then we're never going to step away from that cycle, and we just keep recycling and recycling. And no wonder that we just feel like nothing's changing, right? We have to be able to see the cycle and then be willing and be committed enough, right, to be able to step outside of it, to try something different, right? um, so then, when we create awareness around what's going on, and kind of like look at this idea, how do I want this to be different for myself, right? How do I want to wake up and feel? How do I want to go to bed feeling? How do I want to feel throughout my day? um so it's really about looking at, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, being really intentional, right? Another tool that's great to use is journaling or visualizing, just in terms of being able, because I think a lot of times we spend a lot of time in our heads, right? Because we're constantly intellectualizing or trying to, analyze and organize everything in our heads. But a good way to really see what it is that we want to accomplish for ourselves in terms of how we want to feel on a daily basis is to really get outside of our head and kind of like take the walk down to our hearts, right? So when we are in our heart space, we're able to kind of like connect to our body and notice like, okay, so I would love to be able to wake up and feel rested, right? I would love to be able to wake up and have enough time to, make myself a nurturing breakfast, right? Or have my coffee and maybe have 10 minutes to journal, right? Just write down my thoughts and feelings for the day, right? Or, throughout the day, I know I'm going to be really busy at work. Can I allocate maybe in my calendar 3 different 10-minute breaks, right? Just so I can step back and take some deep breaths, right? And slow down. Um, and I can't tell you how big of a difference these small little tweaks actually make um, on a daily basis, right? Uh, and so once we start looking at, how we want to feel and having an idea of what we may or may not want to introduce, maybe on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, in terms of the rituals and practices, the other thing that kind of gets in the way for people before they even have started is this idea of perfectionism, right? We think that, okay, so now I know what I want to do and I know when I want to do it and I know what works for me. So I have to, tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to do it all correct. And, I'm going to be perfect at self-care, right? But perfectionism, as some of you may know, is an illusion, right? And there's no such thing, right? It's just something that keeps us, it's almost like a wall that keeps us from actually showing up and doing what we can, right? The other thing sometimes we do is we, compare ourselves to other people and feel like, oh, but they're doing such a great job. Like, what's wrong with me? Or why am I not able to stick to my, 3-day a week workout routine, right? Or, my friend, she has 2 kids, but she's able to do the cooking, to do the cleaning, to meditate, whatever, to go to yoga, whatever it might be. But, we're all different, right? And we don't fully know what's going on with somebody else, right? We just don't, right? So the good thing, or the thing to do here, is to really have some compassion with self, right? To slow down and to allow ourselves the dignity of like failing and not doing it perfectly and learning through this experience, right? And finding some grace, in this process, because it might be new for us. And so we want to take it easy on ourselves, right? um okay, so here I've kind of just jotted down a few different self-care rituals, routines, tools, practices that have been helpful to me, and that I've found when I work with clients on this all the time, one-on-one, and they've also found it's been really helpful in their own lives. So feel free to, copy these down. I think Maggie had said that we're gonna send you guys you'll be emailed this presentation as well. And of course we're recording it, so you'll have access to it afterwards. But let's see. So I think, I have gratitude on there as the first one because it has been so beneficial for myself in my own self-care routine. And I know it's worked for others, right? And I'm actually on this email list with 15 other women, and every day we just write 5 things that we're grateful for. And we've been doing this for, what is it? I think 4 years now. And, isn't that crazy how when you make a decision to try something and you try it, for one day, and then you try it again for the next day, and then you just keep doing it. And then, 4 years later, you have continued doing it, right? And gratitude is so powerful because, when we're in gratitude, our whole mindset shifts, right? And so when we're in gratitude, we can't be in fear, right? We can't really be in anxiety. We can't even be worrying, because when we're in that space of gratitude, we're actually just in a space of ease, right? and usually joy and love, right? So this is such an easy practice, and it's fun to do with a friend maybe, or a couple of friends, and make it fun. Let's see, and then some of the other practices on here I had mentioned before. Meditation, I think it's great. Breath work and yoga. um, and I think if you are working at home, as most of us are doing these days, we can kind of like work with our schedule a little bit and move some things around. So if you're sitting at your desk at home all day working on the computer, just getting away for 5-10 minutes, and taking some deep breaths, or just finding some very basic stretches through yoga is so beneficial, because again, it helps you to walk that path from being really just in your head to kind of like reconnecting with your body. And every time we reconnect with our body, we find this feeling of ease, right? We move away from worrying about what's going to happen at the next office meeting or the next Zoom call, or whatever, it may be that we have going on for the day, right? And some of the other things, are working out, because anytime we move our body, we change the way we feel, right? And there's quite a few things here. I had mentioned before this idea of saying no, right? A lot of times we feel that we have to do it all, or otherwise hashtag FOMO. We have this fear of like missing out. So it's really important to think about of not overscheduling. And once again, taking a look at our calendar and seeing how we can allocate certain time slots for certain practices that we want to take on, right? And then, of course, if you are a person that tends to, that has an easier time to kind of focus on yourself and do more things for yourself, then for you, it might be beneficial to try to say yes to more things, right? To connect with more people or do more group things, right? Because another thing that helps us feel at ease and come back into this parasympathetic nervous system of like rest and digest is really connecting with other people, right? And similarly, when we're out in nature, it does the same thing. So all of these are really great tools and practices to take on, for self-care. Okay. All right. So making it a habit. Okay. So I think consistency, of course, is really important. And I forget now, but and I believe it's a quote, but it might not be. But just this idea that what we practice the most grows the strongest, right? It's pretty basic, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Because when we first start doing yoga or when we first start meditating, we're not going to be amazing at it to begin with, right? It's a practice, right? And we have to, earlier I talked about commitments. We have to find that commitment and willingness to show up for the work consistently, and essentially it becomes a habit, right? And a fun way to create these habits is to get away from what I was talking about earlier, this idea of perfectionism, right? It doesn't have to be perfect all the time. We don't have to do all the things all the time, but we can start small, right? And you'd be surprised how this idea of doing one thing over time makes a huge difference. And, in a year from now is a completely different big thing, right? And the other thing that's really helpful with just, creating these new habits of rituals and routines around self-care is to plan it with the people that we love, right? If you are as a family at home, maybe, on Saturdays, you plan, some type of I don't know, if you're doing a puzzle, maybe, then in the midst of the puzzle, you do like 10 jumping jacks or something, right? So it's a fun way to be together as a family, and it's a fun way to create a specific time for the family and also get in some creative and movement time, right? And if you want to make working out from home a little bit more fun, and working out and moving your body is one of your self-care routines, then, you know, maybe scheduling a Zoom date with one of your friends and doing Zoom video dates and, you know, doing yoga together, or, you know, whatever type of workout, dancing. There's so many different ways of doing it and making it a little bit more fun for you, right? So you can keep this going. All right, and so starting to get towards the end here, but I did want to mention this idea of paying it forward. So once we've kind of gotten into this practice, right, we've created some of these new habits where we're able, you know, to put them into practice, and we're noticing that it's making a difference for us, right? We're noticing that we're able to create a mind shift, right, and create a different perception. We feel a little bit more calmer. We feel we're able to step away from the anxiety or from the, you know, endless worrying or whatever it might be. I always tell, you know, my clients, friends, family members that whenever you find that something's working for you, share it with other people, right? If you find, you know, whatever amazing thing that you have going on in your life that works for you. I know for me, when I, you know, find a skincare routine that's, you know, amazing, or I find a workout class where I love the teacher, I always want to share it with the people around me. And so I think, like, same thing with self-care. I think it's so important for us, right? It's so important to take care of us, and it's so important to be able to put these practices in place. And when we find what works for us, share with other people, right? Okay, so I'm gonna, I feel like, stop talking here for a little bit. Here is some further info where you can find me. And you know, as Maggie had mentioned initially in the intro, I do work with clients one-on-one, and, you know, I work on this type of stuff all the time. So, you know, please, if you want more info, I am offering some initial free consultations. They're usually 20 minutes. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to connect and talk to you. And I know, especially, you know, during this pandemic, that we're all, you know, experiencing. It's really sad, and I know for me, it's really heartbreaking for many of us, right? And it can be easy to, you know, really get caught up in the news or focus on what's going on with everybody else. It can be tricky to kind of get back into yourself and do something for ourselves, right? That feels good, because there can be this idea of guilt, right? We feel that, why should I feel good when there's so many people that have it so much worse, right? And there's so many people that are suffering, right? But us suffering will not help the other people that, you know, are suffering. We have to be willing to take care of ourselves, right? All right.
Okay, thanks, Lejla. Should we open it up for Q&A now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll turn on my video here. So if anyone has a question, they can use the chat box or also email info@savvyladies.org. And I was thinking the best way to do this, if you have a question that you'd like to say out loud, you can type that you have a question in the chat, and we'll just go in order that way, and you can unmute yourself for your question. And I did see that we had a question come in over email, so I'll get started with that, and then we'll see what comes up in the chat. The first question is, saying I feel guilty when I put myself first and spend time doing things for myself instead of my family or friends. How can I change my way of thinking about this?
Hmm. Yeah, I love that question. I get that question a lot, actually. And yeah, I mean, I brought it up a little bit here at the end, just this idea of guilt, especially, considering what's going on today. It's really easy to feel a lot of guilt, right? And I think, in addition, obviously, if we have kids, we have a family, as women, we want to show up for our kids, for, our partner, and we want to, be there and nurture. However, you know, the more we do that, but we kind of forget about ourselves, essentially down the road, we will become resentful, right? And when we get in that mind space, we will not be nurturing or helping or having a positive attitude towards anything, right? So I think like a good thing to keep in mind is that, when those thoughts of guilt come up, is this idea that, if I can allocate some time for myself, and it can be very small amounts initially, 5-10 minutes here or there, we can find little pockets. If I can do that for myself, then, when I show up as a mother, when I show up as a partner, to my husband, girlfriend, whatever, I will be so much more present with them, right? I will show up with my cup filled, right? And I would be more present. I would be more loving, probably happier, calmer, more joyful, right? So I think if we're able to just step back and remember, I'm doing this for me, yes, but I'm actually also doing it for everybody else around me, right? Because once I take care of myself, like, I'm just going to be a better person for everybody around me as well. So looking at it that way, I think like it helps finding a way to look at it from a more selfless place, right? I hope that made sense to whoever was asking that question.
Okay, great. Thank you. And again, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat box or let me know you want to unmute yourself and you can ask Lejla your question. And so we had another one come in over email, which was asking about the slide where you had self-care practices and rituals, and asking if you could talk a little bit more about breath work and what
Mhm.
that's like.
Okay, sure. So before actually I started my coaching business, I think I've always been very passionate about the health and wellness industry, and just health and wellness personally for myself. And I have a background in yoga and meditation. I used to teach yoga and meditation for years. And something that I thought was so powerful was this idea. It's called the pranayama, the breath work, right? So on a very basic level, what you could do, or something that I would suggest starting with, is really just, finding a quiet corner in your apartment, in your house, and just, you can sit down on a cushion on the floor. You can sit down, on a chair, maybe on your bed, and see if you can just find a longer spine, just so you're sitting upright, and taking a few long breaths in and deep exhales, right? And just like noticing how, because a lot of times, like, yes, we're breathing, but we're breathing in a very shallow way, right? That kind of like goes consistently with this idea of like fight, flight. We just think that we're in this survival mode and we're just running on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, right? So pausing and taking some of these deeper breaths in is really powerful, because it helps you relax, right, on a body level. It helps your nervous system get back into this parasympathetic system, right, of rest and digest. So it's really powerful. And once you've noticed that you've been able to kind of like slow yourself down a little bit with the deeper breaths, the other thing to add on is you start counting your breath in. So maybe you do it for a count of 4. So you take an inhale and you're counting, 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the exhales, you count 1, 2, 3, 4. And that helps because it allows the mind to focus on the counting. So then you're not thinking about what you're making for dinner later. You're not thinking about the emails that you need to send. You're not thinking about, all the things that go on in our mind, on a minute by minute basis. So those are just the 2 of the tools that you can use around breath work. There are many others. And once again, feel free to send me an email, and I'll be happy to, go into a deeper conversation around this with you guys.
Okay, great.
Sure. I think actually I got a question in here on the chat, but it was sent to me privately.
Sure.
It says, let's see. How do you keep the consistency of self-care without feeling guilty about it? Okay, we had that one. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here. How do you set your priorities and boundaries with a friend who tends to always bring up how terrible she's feeling health-wise, etc.? Okay, so let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. What I'm understanding from this question is the idea of having a friend that feels that there's something going on with her health-wise constantly, and she keeps bringing it to you, and you are wondering how to create some boundaries around that. Does that make sense? Okay, yes, I got it here. She says yes. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm not sure what your profession is, or what your career is, but I'm guessing that you're probably not a doctor, right? And so that would just be a great thing to have a conversation with your friend about, telling her, I'm actually not a doctor. And I appreciate that you are coming to me, and that you trust me with all this information, but I cannot give you medical advice. And so I would suggest making an appointment with a doctor, or making an appointment with whoever that those specific questions relate to, right? Because at the end of the day, I love you and I want to help you, but it's not my expertise. So then having that type of conversation, you've kind of told her, okay, I see a thumbs up, thank you. You've told her that, we don't need to have this conversation over and over again, right? There's another place for you to go with this specific conversation, right? Okay. I hope that was helpful.
Thanks, Lejla. Do you have any more direct? Oh, I'm seeing a thumbs up as well.
Yeah.
Any more chat messages? Because I see another one we just got over email.
No, there was a few just in terms of what I spoke about earlier in terms of feeling guilty.
Okay. Do you have time for one more question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this question is saying, I'm not a morning person, so the idea of working out before my day starts seems difficult, or taking time for self-care before my day starts. But when I tell myself that I'll set aside time after work, I usually feel too drained to do anything. Do you have some tips for fixing this?
Yes. So I actually love that question. It's one of my favorite questions, and I can't even tell you how many people that I worked with, and they say, there's all these things that I want to do. I have a list, I have an idea, but I work a very busy job. I need to be at work early. I have a long commute, and I can't, I already have to get up early, right? And I'm not a morning person. And the only time where I could actually fit this in would be before work, because similarly, I think a lot of people may relate to this, that they feel, they may tell themselves like, okay, I'm going to go work out after work, or I'm going to go do this, that, whatever after work. But when that time comes around, we already feel so drained that we just want to go home and like space out in front of the TV or something, right? Like the motivation is not there, right? And so what I say to, to clients that come to me with this, and even just, with friends and family members, is that there's actually no such thing as not being a morning person. It is one of those like limiting beliefs that we've actually told ourselves so many times over and over again that we now actually believe that to be the truth for us, right? So what I would want to look at with that specific person is, what does their nighttime routine look like? Because if you are going to bed super late, then there's no way you're gonna wake up early enough, right? So I'd want to look at moving around and creating a little bit of a different nighttime routine, bedtime routine, right? And also looking at this whole idea about what the commitment is and how willing are you, because I talked about earlier about this idea, how willing are you to give something up in order to create something that you currently don't have, right? So in this specific example, like let's say, the person goes to bed at 11 p.m., 11:30, right? Would they be willing to go to bed at 10 in order to get up an hour earlier, right? So giving up, staying up later to be able to get more time in the morning, right? And this is just one of the ways of looking at this, right? To create more space in the day, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not that we don't have enough time, it's more about what we prioritize, right? And I think a lot of times we say, I want this, that, or the other thing, but if we're actually not willing to prioritize it, do we actually really want it, right? So we have to dial it back and be fully honest with ourselves. What is it that we actually want? And what is it that we think that we want, but we're not going to take the actions towards creating that, right?
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Very helpful. Thanks, Lejla.
Good.
All right. So unless there's another question over chat, which I'm not seeing, I think those are all the questions that we have for you. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And as Lejla mentioned, we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link for this recording, along with Lejla's contact information and that offer that she mentioned. So we'll make sure you get that over email. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you so much, Lejla. It was excellent.
Thanks, Maggie. And yeah, thanks everybody who showed up. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, please feel free to reach out. I'm here and I'm available, and I would love to help you out with your self-care routine. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.